I'm Caleb from Private Auto, and this is the Porsche Cayenne. Now in this video, we are going to dive into the history of the Cayenne, the specs of the Cayenne, the various trims and generations, as well as the exterior, interior, and of course, since you're in the market for a used one, we're gonna dive into the pricing, as well as what to look out for when buying a used Cayenne. Now, before we dive into this video, this exact car is listed for sale by owner on privateauto.com, the first end-to-end transactional marketplace where you can instantly close the sale anytime, any place. Check it out in the description below. Now let's go ahead and dive into the history of the Porsche Cayenne. This is Porsche's first SUV model, and it launched all the way back in 2002. Porsche is actually owned by Volkswagen, and this model here was designed in conjunction with Volkswagen and shares the same platform as well as some of the same specs as the Touareg made by Volkswagen. 18 years after this model was produced in 2002, 18 years later in 2020, they produced the 1 millionth Cayenne. That's a lot of cars. Now this model here was also the first of a few things for Porsche. It was the first four-door vehicle produced by Porsche, which I think is pretty funny because it took all the way until 2002 for them to make a four-door vehicle. It was also the first V8 production car since 1995 when they discontinued the 928. The diesel version of this car right here pulled a 285-ton airplane. It was an Air France Airbus A380, and it also set a Guinness World Record. Now, since 2002, the Cayenne has gone through 3 generations and has had 25 different variants, meaning different models of the Cayenne and the different trims. So I'm gonna go ahead and read them all off for you. You have the base Cayenne, the Cayenne S, the S Titanium, the S Trans-Siberia, the GTS Design Edition 3, the Turbo S, the S Diesel, the S Hybrid, the SE Hybrid, and the Turbo GT. They even created a coupe version of this vehicle in 2019, which has some of the same variants. Since we have the 2019 base model here, we'll dive into the specs of this model so we don't bore you with the specs of every single model of every single variant. So this model has a 3-liter V6 turbo that puts out about 335 horsepower and does 0 to 60 in 4.8 seconds. It's an 8-speed automatic, it's all-wheel drive, and as far as gas mileage goes, you get 19 miles per gallon in the city and 23 miles per gallon on the highway. So maybe not the most fuel-efficient SUV, but let's be honest, if you can afford this car, you can afford to pay for gas. Now, as I mentioned in the history and the fun facts, this baby can tow. So this model here, the 2019 Cayenne base trim, can tow about 7,700 pounds. It also has 5 driver selectable clearances. It can go as low as 6.4 inches and as high as 10.4 inches. Right now, it's sitting at about 10.4 inches, right? Yeah, that looks about 10.4 inches. Now let's dive into the exterior of the Porsche Cayenne. Up front, you got the 4-point LED headlights underneath the turn signal. Then you got these air intake flow vents. And unique to 2019 and newer, all 4 of these open and close and have different adjustable levels, which I think is pretty cool. Then on the side, you got 19-inch wheels with the Porsche logo smack dab in the center of the rims, which always gives it that elegant, classy look. And then as we work our way to the back here, you have the adjustable rear spoiler that adjusts based on your driving speeds. And if you're going over 100 miles an hour on a track, not on a road, it will automatically adjust to the highest height to keep that drag nice and low and to keep the downward pressure low, which I think is pretty cool, slightly unnecessary because your average driver is not gonna be going over 100 miles an hour. You shouldn't, but if you're on a track, pretty cool feature here. Then around the back, you have the rear lights, and behind the glass here, you have the Porsche text which I love the rear look of Porsches because it's behind this glass, so it just gives it a more elegant look. And down low here, you have dual exhaust tips, giving it that sporty look. And then you got these nice little diffuser lines in the back here, which again, give it the sporty look. That's what Porsche is known for. Now, as you transition a little bit inside the vehicle here, you have a lot of storage space here, perfect for all your family suitcases as you're going on a road trip. You have the spare tire. There it is. You have the spare under here. You also have the privacy cover here to hide all your valuables in the trunk. And honestly, this has a lot of space. I mean, if I can fit, it has a lot of space. And you got the 2 buttons here, and of course the push to close. Now, before we go inside the Cayenne, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel as we release one of these listing reviews every single week. Now that we're inside, this already just feels like a Porsche. So you saw our previous review of the Porsche Taycan, where it was very luxurious and it just felt very high-end. This still feels like it. In fact, it feels like I'm sitting inside of a Porsche sports car, but it's an SUV. It's a mid-size SUV, which I think is pretty awesome. Up front, you have an analog tachometer, which I think is pretty nice because it keeps it, I don't know, sporty. But you have digital displays up here as well, which will display things like the various temperatures, the guidance. You even have your map right here next to your tachometer, which I think is pretty awesome. Then you have tons of buttons. You also have metal shifters here, shift paddles, which just speaks to the high quality of Porsche, whereas other cars may just leave you with plastic ones. Then you have a 12.3-inch touchscreen up here, which has Porsche Connect Plus that is 4G LTE Wi-Fi enabled, as well as Apple CarPlay, but no Android Auto. So if you have an Android phone, you're sorry out of luck. Then you have this interesting gear selector. This is how you change gears. And what's interesting is that it'll move itself into park if you're doing it manual. And on the manual mode, you go up to go down and down to increase your gear. So it's kind of reversed from what you would expect. Slightly confusing there, but you probably won't be using the manual shifting very often. It'll be an automatic, which then is relatively normal. But also down here in the console, the center console here, you have a very interesting touch controls here for your temperature, for your seats, for your heater, and it has haptic feedback. So it feels like you're tapping a phone that's vibrating, but it goes in a little bit, which I think is pretty cool. But then they went away from the touch and gave you these little knobs that is how you increase and decrease the temperature settings, the fan, and you also have a volume selector here, as well as a knob here to control what you see up on the touchscreen here. So it's touch, but it also has the rotary dial here. Also on the inside up front, you have handles on either side, which I think is kind of unique for a driver's side because you should never need both of these. But on the passenger side, you also have both handles for some extreme off-roading, which this vehicle is all-wheel drive and does handle pretty well in terms of off-road. Then you have Bose speakers for high-quality sound, and you also have heated and ventilated or cooled seats, along with a thigh extender. I don't actually know the technical term for this, but we're just gonna call it the extender, seat extender, to make it a little bit more comfortable for long road trips. Now, the last thing that's kind of unique about this car is to start it, the control is on the left side. Instead of plugging in a key to the right side, it's touch start, kind of. So I have the key in my pocket, but you still have a dial that you turn, but it's on the left side. So to start the car, you twist and hold it like it's a key, but it's not a key. Now you also have an extremely long sunroof here. Actually, it's probably, oh no, you can extend it. Okay, so an extremely long sunroof that goes all the way back from the front all the way very far back, and they're about the same size as far as like the width of each panel. And you can also open it, close it, just like you would a normal sunroof. And you can also bring it back all the way for the front passenger for those nice breezy summer drives. And of course, in typical Porsche fashion, you have your manual chronometer up here for tracking those lap times. You're usually used to like using the gear selector, like going up and down to go into park. With this one, you push the button in the middle to go into park. And then to go out of park, you push the button underneath here and go into drive, go into reverse, what have you. But to park it, it's a button. Now moving to the rear of the vehicle, you have heated and ventilated seats in the rear, which is super nice, but they also have a little bit of curvature. So it's not a flat like rear bench. It gives it that sporty feel of like you are locked in for sport mode. You also have some cup holders here that are not family friendly. And you have some USB ports here for charging your devices, good old 12 volt. And you have some storage, kind of. Like this is hard here, so this is like for, I don't know, papers. And since we're back here, I'm 5'5", and I have more than enough legroom, and this is pretty dang far back. Our videographer is 6'1", and let's show what he looks like in the back. So here's our videographer there. He's 6'1" with the same seat position as I was in. Super comfy. Now, before we go on this drive here, you do have 3 different drive modes. And when you tap on off-road, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 off-road modes. You have on-road, gravel, mud, sand, and rocks, which I think is pretty sweet, especially for an SUV. You also have a rear locking differential. So on the screen, you can tap a lock to lock that differential, which is super nice for off-roading. You wouldn't consider a Porsche an off-road car, but this SUV definitely is. So we'll go ahead and kick this baby into drive and do a little drive here. All right, so now that we're driving, this car definitely feels like a sedan, which is pretty unique because it is a big, heavy SUV. It weighs over 5,000 pounds, but it feels like I'm driving a Porsche sedan, which is pretty cool. Like you can tell Porsche definitely put a lot of thought into the driving feel and trying to make it feel like a sedan. So we're in sport mode right now. Let's go ahead and test the acceleration. It does take some like, woohoo! It does take a little bit to get up and go, but it definitely has some power once all the pistons start firing and everything kind of kicks in. So it's still very much a performance vehicle, but in terms of acceleration and get up and go power, I don't quite feel that. That responsiveness in the turning that I kind of would expect from a Porsche is definitely there. Now let's talk pricing. When the Porsche Cayenne, the 2019 model, the base model, was launched, it launched with an MSRP of $67,500. Now, depreciation has this depreciating about 47% over the course of 5 years, which is actually in the top 10 best depreciating models in the luxury SUV category. So, in terms of holding its value, it's actually pretty good. Now this one here is listed for sale on privateauto.com for $39,900, which is about in line with what you would expect as far as depreciation goes. Now that we've talked about pricing, you're in the market for a used one, so we should probably talk about what to look out for when buying a used Porsche Cayenne. Now this applies to all Cayenne models, so keep that in mind regardless of the year or model that you're looking out for. Just pay attention to some of these things. The first thing with any Porsche vehicle is that the maintenance costs are pretty high. So you want to make sure you take that into account when going after a used vehicle, is that any maintenance costs you have are going to be higher because the cost of parts are much higher than your average SUV. Now in the 2003 to 2006 years of the Cayenne, you want to look out for the coolant pipe because in those years it was plastic, so it had a high rate of failure and cracking, which then they later replaced all of those with aluminum in any year after that. So if you buy one before 2006, take a look underneath the hood for those plastic coolant pipes and if there's cracks. Now, another thing to look out for, make sure you get in the car before you go on a test drive, turn it on and listen to see if you hear any tapping. If you hear any tapping, this is bad news. Do not buy that car because that is most likely an engine problem, and replacing an engine in a Cayenne will cost more than the car is actually worth. Now, when you take it for a test drive, drive slowly and also listen for some more tapping, rattling, or like repeated hitting in the middle of the car up near the front of the vehicle. That could be the result of the cardan shaft coming a bit loose, which you will want to get looked at before you purchase the vehicle, because if you hear that, that's most likely a bad sign. And then in general, avoid any pre-2007 Porsche Cayenne S models because those are notoriously known for engine failure. So just avoid those when you're shopping used, okay? And here at Private Auto, we always recommend you get a pre-purchase inspection before buying any vehicle used, especially when buying private party. Luckily for you, we've integrated with Lemon Squad and you can order an inspection right within the Private Auto app as part of the process when purchasing a private party vehicle. Now that we've reviewed the car, gone on a quick drive, let's go into the final thoughts. This car has the perfect blend of luxury, performance, and sportiness that you would expect from a Porsche, but in an SUV, which I think is pretty unique because it does not feel like an SUV. So if you're looking for a fantastic family car that has the room for all the family, space for all the luggage, but you want to feel like you're driving a sports car, the Porsche Cayenne is perfect for you. That's all on this car. We'll see you on the next one.